If God is dead, then so are we. Some of you may have heard of the Nietzsche statement, God is dead, from the 1882 collection Die fröhliche Wissenschaft, or the Joyous Science. This bold statement foreshadowed the decline of religious practices and general belief in Western culture. To only point to the secularists and atheists is to severely underrepresent the underlying change in how even those who would call themselves religious have had their approach to belief and how they interact with the religious institutions altered. To be sure, there are still religious zealots and ultra-orthodox holdouts, but for the general population there has been a complete shift in their moral subconscious. For the large proportion of our society, every subsequent generation since Nietzsche's statement was made has, step by step, stripped away the religious elements of our old culture that affect our collective cohesion. As has been reasonably claimed, that even if we are not religiously active Christians anymore, we are, to a large part, brought up as if we were. Parallel to this, our society is still largely structured as if we were religious Christians. Because being religious was such a large part of our culture for so long, it has inevitably affected every aspect of social institutions and social interactions/behaviors. How we behave and how we act while we live is massively tied to how we view what happens to us after we die, regardless of the actual details. If we honestly believe that there is a judgment, reckoning, or consequences after our inevitable demise, this has a massive impact on every decision we make during our lifetime. There are unending examples of individuals, even today, misusing devout faith to further their own delusional interpretations to the harm of everyone, as well as enough examples of those that clearly don't believe in what they themselves preach, because their own actions would, by their own words, condemn them to an afterlife of torment if it were true. There are plenty of good reasons why Western culture has become less religious. What is often not discussed, however, are the massively underestimated negative consequences that have come along with this shift. The development in the Western world over the last few generations have clearly shown that civilization and society cannot function without an underlying belief structure that incorporates consequences for our actions while alive, after death. Western culture is faltering and will eventually fall if this is not addressed. Our institutions, politicians, police, journalists, teachers, and even private owners of vast wealth and capital, and other leading figures, the structures of these systems is built on the provision that these individuals are of moral standing, have so-called Christian values driving their decisions. It is obvious from history that these positions were often filled by people who had no such belief deep down, even if on the surface they loudly proclaimed themselves to be ardent believers. The irony that many of the most un-Christian acts over the last few years are being undertaken by those claiming to be the true faithful is surely not lost on most. The zealots are just as crazy and hypocritical as they ever were. The problem today is that there is no longer a moderate religious majority to call them out, or others, out on their behavior. Only a cynical, secular majority remains, one that does not even bother to sanction those in power who are showing morally objectionable behavior. Morally corrupt individuals have always craved power. As I stated before in other videos, power does not necessarily only corrupt. The corrupt seek power. In the past, where the expectation of Christian values was still a requirement for any position of authority, these individuals would at least be constrained into being forced to at least act as if they believed in these values in public, or face the ire of their peers and the public. If they overstepped the line, they would be unceremoniously thrown out by the moderate majority. Regulating such things has always been hit and miss, but today it is not regulated at all. Corruption and unchristian actions are almost expected by the cynical majority of those in power. Every institution is quickly becoming swamped by morally corrupt individuals who don't even have to bother to hide their morally questionable actions anymore. Society based on selfish personal gain, without overworldly consequences for bad behavior, will fall. It is only a matter of time. Either we admit to ourselves that our social institutions are magnets for morally questionable individuals who are no longer constrained by the expectation of the generally accepted religious-based morality system and tighten the requirements of office. For this, see my video on concession-based authority, link in the description below, or admit to ourselves that a majority of society believing in a morality system that holds our actions while alive to account is desirable. While I think the first will always be required, the corrupt are unendingly crafty after all, the current development would clearly show a need for a parallel spiritual revival to safeguard our secular way of life. Ironic, I know. As the original orthodoxies were the reason we went secular to begin with, it is clear that it's simply to go back is futile, as much as simply creating a new unquestionable orthodox would be. We need to get rid of the orthodoxy. We need a common metric across all religions that is not focused on the methods, but the results. Does your religion help you to become a better person and enjoy your life more while improving the lives of those you come in contact with? Does it help you make the world a better place for everyone? If not, something needs to change. Not necessarily the religion itself, but something within it. How is it possible to maintain such diversity while also furthering the religious spanning belief that we are held accountable for our actions after our death? Our interpretation of the afterlife must change. It is not actually that difficult from the interpretational point of view, as most religions are vague regarding the afterlife, other than our actions while on earth dictate if it will be pleasant or not. How can an afterlife be interpreted so that our secular ideals are reinforced while also reinforcing moral virtue collectively? That is how. We are all coming back in one form or another, randomly. That means we can be male or female, straight or gay, or anything in between, rich or poor, Asian, African, Muslim, Hindu, etc. Whatever. We collectively make this world a heaven or a hell. We collectively come back to reap what we have sowed. The single change would usher in an era of reform and camaraderie amongst religions, while strengthening secular values and setting a solid moral framework for expected religious values amongst our fellow humans, which will hopefully keep the inevitable recurring psychopaths and morally corrupt out of positions of authority. There is a reason why every known civilization has spirituality, where most individuals have a strong belief in the afterlife with consequences for actions during our life. And it is not only because of a fear of the unknown. We should ask ourselves more, why is a belief in the afterlife so important for humanity, for a functioning society? For more details regarding the idea of secular spirituality, check out my video on why a nihilist could believe in God. Also a link in the description below. I hope that was of interest. All the best and take care.